Super Rugby, the Super Round, folks, for Saturday and Sunday. It's more Aussie and New Zealand action with the Fijian Drua in the mix as well. We'll go through some predictions, some lineups and stats, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how these games are going to go. It is going to be an interesting test just to see where the Aussies and Kiwis are at. But it's a Kiwi-Fijian matchup for the first one with the high-flying Blues, 7-1, taking on the Drua, who are the opposite with 1-7. Just that early win over the Rebels in the wins column for the Drua. So on paper, this one looks like it could be a bit of a whitewash for the Blues. But that being said, they haven't played the Drua yet, ever. It's the first game. And I feel like the Aussie sides are slightly adapting better to the way the Drua are playing. Because the Drua aren't kicking much and they're looking to run a lot of ball, which, I mean, I guess makes sense when you've got a side like the Drua are stacked with a lot of former sevens guys and whatnot. So keeping ball in hand, sometimes to their own detriment, but sometimes to kind of like magic moments. It kind of comes more naturally. But anyway, we'll see how well the Blues can deal with this. They have made a few changes. It's a bit of rotation. Rikitelli and Olala get starts. Bodie's still there at 10, but it's Funaki at 9. Ratamaitavuki Nipkins comes in at fullback. So, yeah, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck gets a start as well. So a good chance for him to have a decent run in the back row. And, the bench is all changed, man. Largely, Signa's back in. Talia's in, Tuna Koafe's back in, Vikena is back in. So, big time changes for the Blues side, but still the core pieces are in place, Rico and guys like that. For the Drua, they are without a couple of their big guns in Habosi and Vota, which is kind of disappointing because in the wing and on the midfield, both those two guys have been absolute units. And, I mean, the Drua beat more defenders than anybody else in this competition. And I think Habosi's like the number one guy and Vota's top 5. So, yeah, big guys to be without, although Revovo is still there in the midfield, and he is a proper unit as well. Darren Alangi, the Lucy and captain, he's a guy you can't afford to show the outside because he will burn you for pace, even if he's a Lucy. We've seen him embarrass a few guys so far this season. Manimbi's there in the second row. Solo's going to have a big job ahead of him at scrum time. But, Lamani is interestingly on the bench for this one. So, how well the Drua go against the high-flying Blues team is going to be interesting. Like I mentioned, stats. The Drua, the most defenders beaten, the least kicks from hand. Will we see them put a bit more boot to ball against the Blues? Probably not. How well the Blues adapt to the Drua playstyle or just whether they play their own game will be interesting. And, the Blues, apart from with the Canes, they are the best, so second best team for getting clean breaks. The Blues are pretty deadly. The Blues by 30 points with the bookies and 34 points with the algorithm. Expected to be pretty comfortable winners. The Canes and the Reds is kind of an important one for the Reds to get a competitive result here. The Canes are 4-4, the Reds are 7-1, but the Reds are without James O'Connor, which is a real, I don't know, it's a real letdown. That guy's been kind of struggling with injuries for a wee while. He's been in and out, but this is particularly one game we would have liked to see him be playing. But for the Canes, Wes Hulison's back. Pete Umanga Jensen is in the midfield. That sees Geordie switch back to a more familiar fullback role. Adi Savi is still playing. TJ Perenara is still playing. Aiden Morgan, not vastly experienced at 10 either. So it's kind of two relatively rookie 10s up against each other for this one. Taro Lomax gets a start. So, it's I don't know. It's not quite the strongest Canes team, but I mean, when you've got both the Savia brothers, you've got Blake Gibson, who's been in good form, Reed Prinsep, it's still a pretty strong-looking Canes side. The Reds have had to bring Jock Campbell back in at fullback, and because Pataya is out. Like I mentioned, there's no James O'Connor, so Lawson Crichton gets a start at 10. So those are two big names to be missing. They have started Tupou, which kind of makes sense because he's one of their key men. McDermott's captain, he's at 9, so he's another key man to have back. Remember, they were both out for a while. James O'Connor and Tate McDermott, so the fact they got one out of two is better than nothing. In midfield is still Stewart and Paisame, so that's pretty stable. Mac Creeley's come in on the bench as kind of that outside back cover. So we'll see how the Reds go. I do think they need to be competitive, More pressure on the Brumbies, but still, this one needs to be a good game. So it's a neutral venue. Remember, all these games are in Melbourne, but the Canes are favourites. The rugby forecast algorithm's got it being close with 1 point. but the bookies are saying Canes by 8. And I mentioned the Canes, they get the most clean breaks of any side. 6.3 is their average a game, so they are far and away the top side. But that being said, the Reds concede the fewest tries, so attack against defense. We will see how that one pans out. The next game, Highlanders and Brumbies, like I mentioned, in terms of pressure, there's a bit of pressure on the Brumbies here because they are 7-1 up against the bottom New Zealand side, apart from Moana Pacifica. But that might be a bit of a false reading because the Highlanders have had some close games. They almost beat the Crusaders. You know what I mean? They haven't been getting flogged, so they're not a bad team despite their record. So there's a bit of pressure on the Brumbies with that record, but yeah, this one could be the closest one of the 4 games on the weekend. We will see. I'm glad to see Folau Fakatava get a start for the Highlanders this week because he's been kind of living off very few minutes with Aaron Smith taking the majority, and Aaron Smith is getting the rest this week. Kane Hamilton is in on the bench. HURvRED also gets a start. Gareth Evans switches to number 8 from number 6. Vahakolo and Dawai are the wings this week, so Scott Gregory's in at 12 and Thomas Umanga Jensen is in at 13, and then Mitch Hunt is at 15 with Marty Banks at 10. So we could see maybe a bit more of a kicking game from the Highlanders this week, which would be unusual because more than any team in Super Rugby this year, they've been a possession-based team. That's not always been that useful position because their meters per carry is pretty low compared to some of the other teams around them, but they like the ball. They're not a team to like to kick it away anymore, which I've mentioned a few times. The Brumbies, remember, they've had the bye, so they should be really fresh and fit and ready to go. Hopefully no rust after the week off. I mean, Nick White and Lola Sio are the 19 combo. We haven't seen Lola Sio for a few weeks because he's been out, so good to see him return. Scotty Sio is in at loose head. Rob Valtini's in at number 6. Andy Muirhead and Cam Clark are the wings. Simone and Ikitau are the midfielders. Tom Wright, top try scorer of the competition, is there at fullback. So there's certainly a lot of Wallabies in this Brumbies side. The stereotype would be that their maul is going to be a big decision maker as to whether they get any success. They do maul it more than anyone else. That's just a fact. The Brumbies set more mauls than anybody else. So if the maul can get going, then they could get some pay against the Highlanders. The Highlanders love a good maul as well, to be fair. They mauled Moana Pacifica to death a few weeks ago. So yeah, but I don't want to sleep on the Brumbies' backs. Tom Wright's the top try scorer for a reason, and he's not a hooker. So there you go. That one could be tight, and the bookies have got it tight. 3 points with the Highlanders, say the bookies, but on the flip side, the Rugby Forecast algorithm says Brumbies by 1. So it could be tight. Last one, Crusaders and Rebels. I know the Rebels are at home. I've got all the Aussie teams on that side of the board. This could be messy. I hope not. But yeah, the Crusaders will be hurting because they lost to the Blues the other day for the first time in a long time. So they'll be wanting to answer back. And they've picked a lot of All Blacks. You got Mo'unga at 10. Bridge is moving to 15, which is interesting. He's up from the bench. Sever Reese, Braden Enor. Jack Goodhue is back at 12. Lester Fainganuku and Mitch Drummond. Those two are the only non-All Blacks in their back line. Ethan Blackhead is moving to 7 to make way for Pablo Matera at 6. Sam Whitelock is back. George Bauer is starting. There's a whole bunch of All Black big guns in this Crusaders side. That being said, there's still some Wallabies on display for the Rebels. I mean, Rob Leota is in at 6, which is good news. Brad Wilkins up from the bench at 7. Michael Wells moves to 8. James Tuttle and Matt Tamua are the 19 combo. That's kind of familiar stuff in recent weeks. Callaway is still in the midfield with Ely alongside him at 12. Reece Hodges at fullback, Cameron Orr, and everyone's favourite Copus Eloff are the props. So only a handful of changes for them. I know they're at home, and the Crusaders kick a lot. I say that week on week. It's their number one stat. Crusaders kick the ball a lot, so the Rebels' back three is going to need to be on form because they'll punish you. But the one that worries me a bit more is the Rebels still have the lowest tackling percentage in Super Rugby. They're playing that Crusaders back line, so yeah, there could be trouble, but fingers crossed the Rebels can pull their finger out and put in a good shift. They have been improving, but they're going to need to take another step up because they pushed the Reds close a week before. They'll need to probably take a step up from there, I would imagine, to play the Crusaders. But that being said, the Crusaders are 6-2. They haven't been as unstoppable as they have been in previous years. Not yet, anyway. Bookies say Crusaders by 28. Algorithm says Crusaders by 23. So those are the 4 games this weekend. Plus, remember, we've got Chiefs Waratahs on today. You guys let me know your thoughts. So the bookies and the algorithm are a little bit split, but the bookies certainly have got a New Zealand clean sweep. Do you see that being the case, or can you see an Aussie team or 2 picking up a win? 3 maybe? You guys have any thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.